The massive space station called Ironhold Terminal floated quietly in the darkness of space. It was home to thousands of creatures from different worlds. Some came to trade, others came to fix their broken ships. A few came to talk about peace between their planets. Day-One wiped the oil from his hands with an old rag. His small repair shop sat in the lower levels of the station, where the air always smelled like engine fuel and hot metal. He liked it down here. It was quiet. Most people stayed in the upper levels where the shops were cleaner and the lights were brighter. He was 32 years old and had been fixing things since he was a boy. His father taught him how engines worked. His mother taught him patience. Both lessons served him well in this place where machines from 100 different worlds broke down every day. The shop was small but organized. Tools hung on the walls in neat rows. Parts filled labeled boxes on metal shelves. In the corner sat a small cot where Day-One sometimes slept when work kept him late. A kettle for tea rested on a heating plate. This shop was more than his workplace, it was his home. Today felt different, though. The whole station buzzed with unusual energy. Day-One heard the whispers from the traders who came to his shop. Important aliens were arriving, diplomats, politicians. Something big was happening in the upper levels. He did not care much about politics. He cared about keeping machines running. Around midday, the station's speakers crackled to life. A voice announced the arrival of Ambassador Thalvira from the Velshara Dominion. Day-One paused his work on a broken coolant pump. He had heard of the Velshara. Everyone had. They looked like the dragons from old Earth stories. Massive creatures with scales that shimmered like jewels. They had wings and could breathe fire. Most species feared them. The Velshara were powerful warriors. Their technology was advanced. Their ships could destroy entire fleets. But they were also honorable. They kept their promises. They valued family above everything else. Day-One returned to his work. The coolant pump would not fix itself. Several levels above him, Ambassador Thalvira stepped off her transport ship. She stood 9 feet tall. Her scales shifted colors in the light, showing blues and purples and greens all at once. 4 wings folded against her back. Her eyes were golden and wise. Behind her came 3 small creatures. They were her children, her hatchlings. Each one was the size of a house cat. Their scales were softer than their mother's, still developing their full color. They chirped and trilled as they walked, looking at everything with wide, curious eyes. The smallest one was named Bora. Her scales held hints of silver. She stayed close to her mother's legs, peeking out at the strange station with nervous energy. The middle child was Hana. She had scales that showed flashes of green. She was clever. Her eyes darted everywhere, taking in every detail, learning the layout of this new place. The largest was Tay. His scales carried traces of red. He was bold and fearless. He walked ahead of his mother, tail swishing with confidence. In Velshara, culture, important leaders brought their young children to witness diplomatic events. This taught them leadership. This showed them how to negotiate peace. This prepared them for the responsibilities they would carry when they grew large and powerful like their mother. Ambassador Thalvira needed these negotiations to succeed. Her people and the Kryn coalition had been enemies for generations. Now both sides were tired of war. They wanted peace. But peace was fragile. It required careful words and careful actions. The ambassador and her hatchlings were led to special quarters in the diplomatic wing. The rooms were large and comfortable, but they were designed for species that stood on 2 legs and used furniture. The Velshara preferred open spaces and warm stone to rest upon. The hatchlings explored their new temporary home. They sniffed at strange objects. They tested the strength of the viewing windows with their tiny claws. Their mother watched them with affection. Her tail curled protectively around the space they occupied. 3 days passed. The negotiations began. They were long and tiring. Ambassador Thalvira spent hours in conference rooms, discussing treaties and territories and trade agreements. The hatchlings waited in their quarters with a caretaker from their homeworld, but hatchlings grew bored easily. On the 4th day, disaster struck in an unexpected way. A cargo transport malfunctioned near the diplomatic wing. Its anti-gravity systems failed. Massive containers began to fall. Alarms screamed throughout that section of the station. People ran in every direction. Security personnel rushed to contain the situation. In the chaos and the noise and the flashing lights, 3 small hatchlings panicked. The caretaker tried to keep them calm, but fear was stronger than training. Bora, Hana, and Tai did what frightened creatures do. They ran. Their small size let them slip through the crowd. Their sharp claws helped them climb where others could not follow. They found an opening in the wall, a ventilation grate knocked loose by the falling cargo. They squeezed through and disappeared into the darkness of the station's ductwork. By the time the cargo situation was controlled, the hatchlings were gone. Ambassador Thalvira's anguish filled the diplomatic wing. Her powerful voice echoed through the corridors as she called for her children. Security teams mobilized immediately. Every guard on the station began searching. They checked every room, every hallway, every storage closet. They found nothing. The Velshara had a special connection to their young, an empathic bond that let parents sense their children's emotions and location. But Ambassador Thalvira felt only a faint presence. They were alive. She knew that much. But something blocked the connection. The metal walls of the station, perhaps, or the distance, or their fear. Days became a week, then 2 weeks. The search continued, but hope faded. Some whispered that the hatchlings had died, lost in some cold maintenance shaft. Others suggested they had been stolen, taken by those who opposed the peace negotiations. Ambassador Thalvira refused to believe either possibility. She felt her children out there somewhere, alive, waiting. But where? In his shop far below, Daewon noticed small things going missing. A few dried ration packs from his emergency supplies. A thermal blanket he kept for cold nights. Small tools that he was certain he had left on his workbench. He also heard sounds, scratching in the walls, soft chirping noises that came from the storage room. He assumed it was station rats. They were common in the lower levels. He was wrong. The hatchlings had traveled far through the ventilation system. They crawled through narrow passages. They squeezed through gaps in the walls. They followed the warm air currents, seeking heat and safety. They found both in Daewon's shop. The engines he repaired generated warmth. The rhythmic sounds of machinery reminded them of home, of the volcanic caves where Velshara nested. The shop was quiet and dark and safe. They watched him from the shadows. They studied this strange 2-legged creature who worked alone and spoke softly to himself. They sensed no danger from him. Only calm. Only focus. Only the steady patience of someone who fixed broken things. So they stayed. And they waited. And they grew brave enough to steal his food. Daewon worked late into the night, unaware that 3 small dragons watched him from the darkness. 2 weeks had passed since the hatchlings disappeared. The entire station still searched for them, but fewer people believed they would be found alive. Ambassador Thalvira refused to give up. She walked the corridors herself, calling for her children with sounds that made the metal walls vibrate. Daewon knew nothing about any of this. He lived in the lower levels where news traveled slowly. He focused on his work. A mining company had brought him a damaged freighter engine. The job was difficult. The engine core had cracked. Coolant had leaked into the power systems. It required careful attention and many hours of work. He worked through the night, then through the next day, then through another night. His eyes burned from exhaustion. His hands ached from holding tools. His back hurt from bending over the massive engine. But he continued. The miners needed their ship operational. They had families to feed. Finally, after 18 hours of continuous work, he tightened the last bolt. The engine hummed to life. The sound was clean and strong. He had done it. The repair was complete. Daewon stumbled to the back room of his shop. He did not bother removing his oil-stained coveralls. He did not wash his face or hands. He simply fell onto the small cot and closed his eyes. Sleep took him immediately. He woke to warmth on his chest. At first, he thought he was dreaming. The warmth felt nice, comfortable, like a heated blanket. But then the warmth shifted, it moved. Something was breathing on him. Day One opened his eyes slowly. His vision focused. 3 small creatures lay curled on his chest. They were the size of cats. Their scales caught the dim light from his work lamps. One was silver. One was green. One was red. They were sleeping peacefully, making soft purring sounds. His heart began to pound. He knew what they were. Everyone in the galaxy knew what Velshara looked like. These were the missing hatchlings. The ones that had caused the entire station to panic. The ones that an ambassador was desperately searching for. They were sleeping on his chest. Day One remained perfectly still. He barely breathed. The hatchlings looked thin. Their scales were dull. Dirt covered their small bodies. They had not been eating well, but they were alive. They had survived 2 weeks alone in the station. The smallest one, the silver one, opened her eyes. Golden eyes stared directly at him. Day One expected fear. He expected the creature to screech and run away. Instead, she made a soft trilling sound. Her tiny tail thumped gently against his chest. She seemed happy to see him awake. The other 2 stirred. Their eyes opened. They looked at him with the same calm trust as the first. The red one yawned, showing rows of small, sharp teeth. The green one stretched her wings, which were no bigger than his hands. Slowly, carefully, Day One raised one hand. He extended a finger toward the silver hatchling. She sniffed it. Then she pressed her snout against his palm. The touch sent a wave of sensation through him. Warmth, safety, trust. He could feel her emotions somehow. This must be the empathic ability he had heard about. Velshara could share feelings with those they touched. The hatchling was showing him that she felt safe with him. She trusted him. She was not afraid. "Where did you come from?" Day One whispered. His voice was rough from sleep. The hatchlings responded with chirps and trills. They understood his tone, even if they did not understand his words. The green one climbed higher on his chest, getting closer to his face. She tilted her head, studying him with intelligent eyes. Day One sat up slowly. The hatchlings adjusted their positions but did not jump off. They stayed with him. The red one perched on his shoulder. The silver one remained on his chest. The green one climbed onto his head, tangling herself in his messy hair. He should call station security immediately. He knew that. These hatchlings were important. Their mother was an ambassador. Their disappearance had nearly caused a diplomatic incident. Returning them was the right thing to do, but he hesitated. He looked at them more closely. They were not just thin. They were scared. Every loud noise from the station corridors made them flinch. Their scales flickered with colors that he somehow understood meant distress. They trembled slightly even while touching him. They had been through something terrible. The accident that caused them to run. 2 weeks of hiding in dark, cold spaces. Living on whatever they could find. Being alone and afraid and lost. Day One made a decision. He would feed them first, make sure they were healthy. Then he would return them. A few hours would not matter after 2 weeks. He stood up carefully, keeping his movements slow. The hatchlings clung to him. He walked to a small storage area where he kept emergency food supplies. He had dried meat, the kind that lasted for months. He pulled out a package and opened it. The smell hit the hatchlings immediately. All 3 of them perked up. Their eyes locked onto the food. The red one made an eager chirping sound. Day One tore off a small piece of meat and offered it to the silver hatchling. She snatched it from his fingers and swallowed it whole. Then she looked at him expectantly, waiting for more. He fed them 1 piece at a time. They ate like they were starving, which they probably were. He gave them water next, pouring some into a clean bowl. They drank eagerly, splashing it everywhere with their enthusiasm. When they finished, they looked at him again. This time their eyes were brighter. Their scales looked a bit shinier. They seemed more alive. The silver one climbed back onto his lap. She pressed her head against his hand, asking to be touched. Day One stroked her scales gently. They were warm and surprisingly soft. She purred louder, and he felt her happiness through the empathic connection. The green one investigated his workbench, sniffing at tools and parts. The red one tried to climb into his toolbox and got stuck, chirping indignantly until Day One freed him. They were just babies, he realized. Curious and playful and trusting. They had been terrified and alone, and somehow they had found their way to his shop. They had watched him work. They had sensed that he was safe. And when they finally gathered enough courage, they revealed themselves in the most vulnerable way possible. They had fallen asleep on him. That meant something. Daewon did not know much about Velshara culture, but he knew that trust was not given lightly. These hatchlings had chosen to trust him. He accessed his computer terminal and searched the station database for information about Velshara. He read about their biology, their culture, their social structures. He learned that hatchlings formed strong bonds with those who protected them during times of fear. These bonds could last a lifetime. The accident had traumatized these three. The loud noises, the chaos, the fear. They ran into the ventilation system and traveled through the cold metal passages of the station. Everything was wrong. Everything was scary. Until they found his shop, the warm engines, the quiet atmosphere, the rhythmic sounds of work. It must have reminded them of home. And when they watched him, they saw someone calm and gentle. Someone who fixed broken things. Someone who could fix them too, perhaps, so they stayed. And eventually they trusted him enough to sleep on his chest. Daewon looked at the three hatchlings playing in his shop. The silver one was trying to carry a wrench twice her size. The green one had discovered his tea kettle and was fascinated by her reflection in the metal. The red one was chasing his shadow across the floor. He knew he had to return them, but not yet. Not when they were still so scared. He would take care of them for a few days, feed them properly, let them feel safe again. Then he would bring them back to their mother. It was the right thing to do. It was the human thing to do. The silver hatchling succeeded in dragging the wrench across the floor. She looked at Daewon proudly, as if she had accomplished something important. He smiled despite himself. "What am I going to do with you three?" he asked softly. The hatchlings chirped in response, and somehow in that moment Daewon felt less alone than he had in years. 3 days passed. Daewon had not contacted station security yet. Each morning he told himself he would do it. Each evening he found a reason to wait one more day. The hatchlings were still too thin. They still flinched at loud noises. They needed more time, that was what he told himself. But the truth was simpler. He did not want to let them go. The silver hatchling, Bora, had become his shadow. She followed him everywhere. When he worked on engines, she sat on his shoulder and watched. When he ate, she begged for scraps. When he slept, she curled on his chest. She had chosen him as her protector, and the bond between them grew stronger each day. Hana, the green one, was the curious explorer. She investigated every corner of his shop. She learned how to open his storage containers by watching him work the latches. She discovered that the heating plate made the floor warm and claimed that spot as hers. She was clever and independent, but she still checked on Daewon frequently, making sure he was nearby. Tae, the red one, was the troublemaker. He tried to eat everything. He chewed on power cables until Daewon caught him. He knocked over boxes of parts. He attempted to climb into a running engine, and Daewon had to pull him out by his tail. But despite his mischief, he was also the most affectionate. He loved to wrestle with Daewon's hands and would fall asleep while being petted. Daewon made them a nest from thermal blankets in the corner of his shop. The blankets held heat from the engines and created a cozy space. The hatchlings loved it. They would pile together in the nest, tangling their tails and wings, making soft, contented sounds. He fed them regularly now. He bought proper food from the station market, telling the merchant it was for a friend's exotic pet. He learned what they liked. They preferred meat, but they also enjoyed fruits and certain vegetables. They loved anything sweet. They drank water constantly. Their scales became shiny and bright. Their eyes grew more alert. They gained weight. They looked healthy again. They looked like they should look. But more than their physical recovery, they seemed happy. They played constantly. They chased each other around the shop. They made games out of his tools. Bora would hide a bolt and Hana would try to find it. Tae would steal someone's prize and a chase would begin. They chirped and trilled and made sounds that almost seemed like laughter. Daewon found himself smiling while he worked. Their presence changed his shop. It felt less lonely. The space that had been just metal and machines now held life and warmth and joy. One afternoon, while Daewon repaired a navigation computer, Hana brought him a tool. It was the wrong tool, but she tried. She dropped a plasma torch at his feet and looked at him expectantly. He thanked her and gently explained that he needed a different tool. She tilted her head, processing this information, then brought him a different tool. Still wrong, but closer. He praised her effort. Tay decided this looked fun. He grabbed a random part from a shelf and presented it to Daewon proudly. It was a piece from a completely different machine, useless for the current repair, but Daewon thanked him anyway. The hatchling's tail wagged with pride. Bora simply stayed on his shoulder and watched him work. She seemed content just being close to him. Sometimes she would nuzzle his cheek with her snout. Each time she did, he felt her emotions through the empathic connection. She felt safe. She felt loved. She felt home. That word echoed in Daewon's mind. Home. Is that what he had become to them? Their home? That evening, his friend Yuna visited the shop. She was a medic who worked in the station's clinic. She occasionally stopped by to bring him food and make sure he was taking care of himself. She worried about him working alone all the time. She knocked on the door. Daewon panicked. The hatchlings were playing in the open. He quickly ushered them into the back room and told them to stay quiet. Then he opened the door. "You look nervous," Yuna said immediately. She was sharp and observant. Nothing escaped her notice. "What are you hiding?" "Nothing," Daewon said too quickly. "Right." She pushed past him into the shop. "You are a terrible liar." She looked around the shop. Her eyes landed on the nest of thermal blankets, on the food bowls, on the small scratches that tiny claws had left on his workbench. Her expression changed from curious to shocked. "Daewon, do you have an animal in here?" Before he could answer, Tay decided this was the perfect time to investigate the visitor. He bounded out of the back room, chirping excitedly. He ran straight to Yuna and sniffed her shoes. Yuna froze. Her eyes went wide. She stared at the small red hatchling at her feet. Then Bora and Hana peeked around the doorframe, curious about the newcomer. "Those are..." Yuna's voice was barely a whisper. "Those are the missing Velshara hatchlings." Daewon closed his eyes. He had known this moment would come. Yes. The ones that the entire station has been searching for. The ones that belong to Ambassador Thalvira. The ones that have caused a massive diplomatic crisis. Her voice rose with each question. "Yes," he said quietly. "How long have you had them?" 3 days, Yuna stared at him. Then she did something unexpected. She sat down on the floor. Tay immediately climbed into her lap. She looked at the small creature, at his bright scales and curious eyes. She touched him gently. He purred. "Tell me everything," she said. Daewon explained. The discovery. The feeding. The bonding. The empathic connection. His guilt about not returning them sooner. His fear that they were not ready. His realization that he had grown attached to them. Yuna listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. She stroked Tay's scales thoughtfully. Bora had ventured close and was sniffing her hand. Hana watched from a safe distance, still evaluating this new person. "They imprinted on you," Yuna said finally. "That is what happened. Velshara hatchlings bond with those who protect them during trauma. It is rare for them to bond with non-Velshara. But it happens." "I know," Daewon said. "I read about it. Their mother has been searching desperately. She believes they might be dead. Every day that passes, she loses more hope." Yuna's voice was gentle but firm. "You have to return them." "I know," he repeated. The words felt heavy, but Yuna continued. "I understand why you waited. Look at them." She gestured to the 3 hatchlings who were now all gathered around her, investigating this interesting new person. They were traumatized. They needed stability and safety before facing another change. "You gave them that. You did a good thing. Then why do I feel guilty?" Daewon asked. "Because you care. About them and about their mother." Yuna examined each hatchling carefully with her medical knowledge. She checked their scales, their wings, their teeth. They are healthy. They are strong. They are ready to go home. "But this is their home now," Daewon said softly. "They think I am their family." Bora climbed onto his lap as if proving his point. She settled against his chest and closed her eyes. "Home," her emotions seemed to say. "Safe." Yuna watched this with a sad smile. "The bond you formed with them is real. But their mother loves them too. She deserves to have her children back. And they deserve to know their own people, their own culture. What if they do not want to leave?" Daewon asked. "Then that will be their choice and their mother's choice. But you have to give them that chance." Yuna stood up. Tay protested, wanting more attention from the nice person with the soft hands. "You need to contact Ambassador Thalvira. Explain what happened. Return her children." She will have me arrested, Daewon said. I kept them hidden. I did not report finding them. I might have ruined her negotiations. Maybe. Or maybe she will just be grateful to have them back alive and safe. Yuna moved to the door. But either way, you know what you have to do. You are not the kind of person who keeps someone else's children no matter how much you love them. After she left, Daewon sat on the floor of his shop. All three hatchlings gathered around him. They sensed his sadness. They pressed against him, offering comfort. Their empathy worked both ways, apparently. He looked at each of them. Bora with her silver scales and gentle nature. Hana with her green scales and curious mind. Tay with his red scales and playful energy. They trusted him completely. They loved him in the simple, pure way that children love. And because of that love, he had to do what was best for them. Even if it broke his heart, he would contact Ambassador Thalvira in the morning. He would return her children, and he would have to learn how to work alone again in his quiet shop. Morning came too quickly. Daewon had barely slept. He kept looking at the hatchlings curled in their nest, memorizing every detail. The way Bora's scales caught the light, the soft sounds Hana made while dreaming, the way Tay's tail twitched in his sleep. At dawn, he finally sent the message. It was simple and direct. He told the ambassador's office that he had found the missing hatchlings. They were alive and healthy. He requested a private meeting to return them. He included his shop location and waited. The response came within minutes. Security would escort him to a meeting room in 1 hour. Ambassador Thalvira would be waiting. The message was formal and cold. It did not say if he would be arrested. It did not say anything about the hatchlings. Just the time and place. Daewon prepared the hatchlings for the journey. He had borrowed a large transport container from a friend who shipped small cargo. He lined it with the thermal blankets they loved. He packed some of their favorite food. He made it as comfortable as possible. The hatchlings sensed something was wrong. They had never seen the container before. They did not want to go inside it. Tay hissed at it. Hana backed away. Bora pressed herself against Daewon's chest and refused to move. I am sorry, he whispered to them. I am so sorry. But you need to go home. Your real home. To your mother. He did not know if they understood his words, but they felt his emotions. His sadness, his love, his certainty that this was necessary. Slowly, reluctantly, they climbed into the container. They huddled together, looking at him with confused, hurt eyes. It was the hardest thing Daewon had ever done. He closed the container lid, leaving air holes so they could breathe and see out. Their small faces appeared in the holes, watching him. 2 security officers arrived at his shop exactly on time. They were professional and quiet. They did not accuse him of anything. They simply escorted him through the station to the upper levels. Daewon carried the container carefully. He could feel the hatchlings shifting inside, hear their nervous chirps. The meeting room was in the diplomatic section. It was large and well-furnished, designed to impress important visitors. Daewon had never been in this part of the station before. Everything was clean and bright and expensive-looking. He felt out of place in his oil-stained coveralls. The security officers left him alone in the room. He set the container on the floor and waited. His heart pounded. His hands shook slightly. He did not know what would happen next. The door opened. Ambassador Thalvira entered. She was massive. Daewon had seen images of Velshara before, but seeing one in person was different. She filled the room with her presence. Her scales shimmered with colors that seemed to shift with her emotions. Her 4 wings were folded tightly against her back. Her golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he did not look away. He met her gaze and waited. The ambassador's eyes moved to the container. Her entire body went rigid. She made a sound, a deep rumbling that came from her chest. It was not threatening. It was grief and hope and desperate longing all mixed together. They are inside? Her voice was surprisingly gentle despite her size. The translator device she wore rendered her words in perfect Korean. Yes, Daewon said. They are healthy. I have been feeding them and caring for them. He opened the container. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Bora's head appeared. Then Hana's. Then Tai's. They saw their mother and made chirping sounds. But they did not immediately run to her. Instead, they climbed out of the container and gathered around Daewon's legs. They pressed against him, seeking his protection. They peeked out at their mother from behind his legs, uncertain and afraid. Ambassador Thalavira's expression changed. Shock, confusion, understanding. She crouched down low, making herself smaller and less threatening. She extended one wing slowly, a gesture that seemed to mean welcome or safety in Velshara culture. "My children," she said softly, "I am here. You are safe now." The hatchlings hesitated. They looked up at Daewon as if asking permission. He knelt down beside them and gently encouraged them forward. "Go to your mother. She has missed you very much." Bora moved first. She took small, careful steps toward the massive dragon. Then she broke into a run. She reached her mother and pressed her small body against those huge scales. Hana followed, then Tay. Within seconds, all three hatchlings were wrapped in their mother's wings. Ambassador Thalvira made sounds that needed no translation. She was crying. Her tears fell onto her children's scales as she held them close. She touched each one with her snout, checking them, confirming they were real and alive. Her relief and joy filled the room like a physical presence. Daewon stood back and watched. He felt like an intruder in this private moment. His heart ached, but he also felt peace. This was right. This was where they belonged. After several minutes, the ambassador looked up at him. Her eyes were still wet with tears. "You saved my children. You cared for them when they were lost and frightened. How can I ever repay such a debt?" "I do not want payment," Daewon said. "I just wanted them to be safe." "Tell me what happened." "All of it," so Daewon explained. The hatchlings hiding in the ventilation, finding his shop because it was warm and quiet, watching him work, finally revealing themselves when they felt safe enough. How he had fed them and cared for them for 3 days before deciding to return them. He also explained why he waited. They were traumatized from the accident. They needed time to feel secure again before facing another change. "I know I should have contacted you immediately. I know I caused you pain by waiting. I am sorry for that." Ambassador Thalvira listened without interrupting. The hatchlings remained pressed against her, but Daewon noticed they kept looking at him. Bora especially. She watched him constantly, her tail twitching. When he finished his explanation, the ambassador was quiet for a long time. She studied him with those ancient, intelligent eyes. "You felt their fear. You recognized their need for stability. You put their well-being above protocol and law." She paused. "Not many would make such a choice." "I could not do anything else," Daewon said simply. "They needed help." The ambassador's expression softened even more. "You gave them more than help. You gave them love. I can feel it. The bond between you and my children. It is strong. It is real." She looked down at the hatchlings. "They have accepted you as nestkin. Do you understand what that means?" Daewon shook his head. "I read that hatchlings can imprint on those who protect them during trauma. But I do not know all of your customs. Nestkin is sacred to us. It means family, but chosen rather than born. It is rare for Velshara to accept someone outside our species as nestkin. It has only happened a handful of times in our history." She touched each hatchling gently with her wing. "But my children have made their choice. They love you. They trust you. They see you as part of their family." Daewon felt his throat tighten. "I love them too. These 3 days with them have been—" He could not find the words, "I understand." The ambassador moved closer to him. Despite her size, she moved with grace. "I have a question for you, human. Would you be willing to remain part of their lives? To serve as their guardian when I must attend to diplomatic duties? To teach them about your species as they learn about the galaxy?" Daewon stared at her. "What? My children need me. But they also need you now. The bond is formed. Breaking it would harm them emotionally. I will not do that to them. So I offer you a place in their lives, if you want it." "I am just a mechanic," Daewon said. "I live in a small shop in the lower levels. I have no status, no importance. Why would you trust me?" "Because they trust you." "Because you cared for them when you had no reason to. Because you returned them even though it clearly broke your heart to do so." Ambassador Thalvira's voice was firm. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Bora suddenly broke away from her mother. She ran to Daewon and climbed up his leg to his chest. She pressed her snout against his cheek. "Stay," her emotion said. "Please stay." Daewon looked at the tiny creature on his chest, at her mother watching with hope and understanding, at Hana and Tay, who were now also moving toward him. He thought about his quiet shop, his lonely evenings, his life of routine and solitude. Then he thought about 3 days of laughter and play and purpose. 3 days of feeling needed and loved. Yes, he said. I would like that very much. 6 months had passed since that day in the meeting room. Daewon's life had changed in ways he never imagined possible. His shop looked different now. The thermal blanket nest remained in the corner, larger than before to accommodate 3 growing hatchlings. They were no longer the size of cats. They had grown to the size of large dogs. Their scales had become brighter and more defined. Bora's silver shone like moonlight. Hana's green had deepened to the color of emeralds. Tay's red blazed like fire. But despite their growth, they were still his hatchlings. They still played in his shop. They still helped him work, though now their help was actually useful. Their small size let them reach tight spaces inside engines. Their natural heat resistance made them perfect for working on thermal systems. They had become his assistants. Today was a typical day. Daewon worked on a transport ship's navigation system while the hatchlings investigated every corner of the vessel. The ship's captain, a gruff alien with 4 arms, watched nervously as 3 small dragons climbed over his equipment. They will not break anything, Daewon assured him. This was not the first time he had brought the hatchlings to a job. They are just curious. If you say so, the captain muttered, clearly unconvinced. Hana discovered a panel that interested her. She chirped at Daewon, pointing with her snout. He came over to look. She had found a crack in the power coupling that he had missed. Good eye, he praised her. She preened, pleased with herself. Tay tried to eat a power cable. Again. Daewon caught him before he could. How many times do I have to tell you? Not food. Tay made a guilty chirping sound, but his tail wagged, unrepentant. Bora stayed close to Daewon as always. She sat on a nearby crate, watching him work. Occasionally, she would bring him a tool without being asked. She had learned which tools he needed for which tasks. She was remarkably good at anticipating what he would need next. The repair took 3 hours. When Daewon finished, the captain tested the navigation system. It worked perfectly. The captain paid him and even gave him a bonus. For the extra entertainment, he said, gesturing to the hatchlings. Back at the shop, Daewon found Yuna waiting. She visited regularly now, bringing food and checking on the hatchlings' health. She had become their unofficial doctor. She monitored their growth and made sure they were developing properly. They are getting big, she observed as Tay bounded over to greet her. He had learned that Yuna always brought treats. Soon, they will be too large for this shop. I know, Daewon said. Ambassador Thalvira mentioned it too. She wants me to visit their home world, to see where they will eventually live when they are full grown. Will you go? I think so. She has invited me 3 times now. It would be rude to refuse again. Yuna smiled. Look at you. A simple mechanic traveling to meet alien dignitaries. Who would have thought? Not me, Daewon admitted. I just wanted to fix engines and be left alone. And now? He looked at the 3 hatchlings playing together. They were wrestling over a wrench, growling playfully. Now I cannot imagine going back to that. They changed everything. His terminal chimed. A message from Ambassador Thalvira. She would be arriving at the station tomorrow. Another diplomatic mission. She asked if Daewon could watch the hatchlings during her meetings. She always asked, even though he always said yes. He sent his confirmation and began preparing. Even though the hatchlings stayed with him most of the time now, he still made sure everything was perfect for their visits. Fresh blankets in the nest, their favorite food stocked, safe spaces where they could play without damaging his equipment. That evening he taught them new words. They had been learning Korean slowly, simple words mostly. Food, water, sleep, work. They understood far more than they could say. Their vocal cords were not designed for human speech, but they tried. Tay had learned to make a sound that was close to day. He used it to get attention. Bora pressed her snout into Daewon's hand. He felt her emotions through their empathic bond. Happy. Safe. Home. These feelings came through clearly now. Their bond had strengthened over the months. Sometimes he could sense what she needed before she showed him. Sometimes she seemed to understand his moods without him saying anything. "You are getting too big to sleep on my chest," he told her. She had tried last week and nearly crushed him. She made a sad, trilling sound. "But you can sleep next to me," he compromised. That night, all 3 hatchlings piled into his sleeping area. They had long outgrown the cot. Daewon now had a larger sleeping pad on the floor. The hatchlings claimed most of the space, leaving him a small corner. He did not mind. Their warmth kept him comfortable. Their presence kept him from feeling lonely. The next day, Ambassador Thalvira arrived. The hatchlings were excited to see their mother. They rushed to her, chirping and showing off how much they had grown. She wrapped her wings around them, making sounds of pride and affection. "They are thriving," she told Daewon. "Thanks to you." "They do most of it themselves," he said. "I just provide food and space. You provide much more than that." The ambassador studied him. "The bond between you has deepened. I can sense it. They see you as more than Nestkin now. They see you as their human parent." Daewon did not know what to say to that. Parent seemed like too big a word, but when he looked at the hatchlings, at how they looked to him for guidance and protection, at how they trusted him completely, perhaps it was the right word after all. The ambassador left for her meetings. The hatchlings settled into their usual routines: work, play, learning. Daewon had customers throughout the day. The hatchlings had become somewhat famous. People came to his shop not just for repairs, but to see the mechanic with the dragon children. Some brought questions about cross-species bonding. Others wanted to hear the story of how they met. A few simply wanted to watch them interact. Daewon tried to maintain normalcy, but he understood the interest. Their relationship was unusual. A human and 3 Velshara living together, working together, being family together. In the evening, while Daewon cleaned his tools, Hana brought him something. A small metal piece shaped carefully into a circle. She had been working on it for days using her claws and teeth. It was a gift, imperfect and crude but made with love and effort. "Thank you," Daewon said, genuinely touched. He put the metal circle on his workbench where he would see it every day. Hana chirped happily and rubbed against his leg. Tay showed off a new trick. He could breathe small puffs of flame now. Just wisps of fire, nothing dangerous yet. But it was a sign of his maturing abilities. He set a small piece of paper on fire and looked immensely proud of himself. Daewon praised him while also explaining the importance of fire safety. Bora simply stayed close, as she always did. She did not need tricks or gifts to show her affection. Her presence was enough. She had chosen him that first night when she climbed onto his chest. She chose him again every day by staying near, by trusting him, by loving him in the simple way that children love. Later, Yuna stopped by again. She found Daewon reading a book about Velshara culture while the hatchlings slept around him. "You look happy," she observed. "I am," he said. "I did not realize how empty my life was before. I thought I was content. But I was just existing. They gave me purpose, they gave me family." "They are lucky to have you too," Yuna said. "Not everyone would have done what you did. Taking in scared children from another species. Putting their needs first. Learning a completely different culture to understand them better." "It does not feel like sacrifice," Daewon said. "It feels like privilege. They chose me. Out of everyone on this station, they found me and decided I was safe, that I was worth trusting. How could I not give them everything I have?" Yuna smiled. "That is what makes you a good parent. The best ones never feel like they are sacrificing, they just love." That word again. Parent. Daewon looked at the 3 sleeping forms around him. Bora's head rested on his leg. Hana's tail was draped across his lap. Tay snored softly, his wings twitching with dreams. They were not his species. They would grow large and powerful someday. They would live on a world far from this station. They would have responsibilities and duties he could barely imagine. But right now, in this moment, they were his children, and he was their human. The stars shone through his shop window. Somewhere out there was the Velshara homeworld, Someday he would visit it. Someday he would see where these three came from, the culture that shaped them, the place they would eventually call home. But for now, this shop was home, this quiet space filled with engines and tools and 3 sleeping dragons. This unlikely family built from fear and trust, and love day one had been a lonely mechanic. Now he was something more. A guardian, a teacher, a friend, a parent. Not because he sought these roles, but because 3 small hatchlings vanished into the darkness and found their way to him. They could have gone anywhere. They could have chosen anyone. But they chose him, and that made all the difference. Bora shifted in her sleep, pressing closer to him. Through their bond, he felt her dreams. They were happy dreams, safe dreams, dreams of warmth and family and home. He stroked her scales gently. "Sleep well," he whispered. "I will keep you safe," and he would, for as long as they needed him, for as long as they wanted him, for as long as he drew breath, because that was what family did. They showed up. They stayed. They loved without condition or limit.